Hello, my dear friends and seekers of ancient wisdom. It's your guide tonight. Call me Thoth, after the Egyptian god of knowledge and written word. Welcome back to this intimate hour we share together, where the modern world fades away and we step into the timeless mysteries of one of humanity's greatest civilizations. Tonight, we're journeying into Egyptian mythology, not as a lecture or a dry recitation of names and dates, but as a living, breathing world of gods and mortals, creation and transformation, death and eternal renewal. There's something profoundly moving about these stories. They've endured for over 3,000 years, whispered across desert sands, carved into temple walls, preserved in papyri by scribes who understood they were recording something sacred. What draws me to these myths is their sophistication. The ancient Egyptians weren't simply creating entertaining tales, they were grappling with the deepest questions humans face. How did the world begin? What happens after death? How do we live with honor and truth? What is the nature of chaos and order? These stories are philosophical inquiries wrapped in the language of gods and magic, of dynasties and cosmic forces. And they're remarkably relatable. The jealousy between Set and Osiris, the devotion of Isis, the ambitions of Horus. These are human emotions and struggles, simply elevated to the divine scale. The sources we're drawing from tonight come from the preserved texts of ancient Egypt itself, the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, and the accounts preserved by Greek historians like Plutarch, who studied Egyptian religion deeply. These aren't modern interpretations, though we'll read them through a contemporary lens of understanding. We're encountering words and ideas that have survived 5 millennia because they speak to something eternal within the human spirit. What makes these narratives so effective for contemplation, for sleep and rest, is their cyclical nature. Egyptian mythology understands the world as a continuous cycle of creation, death, and rebirth. Nothing is truly final. Everything transforms. The sun dies each night and is reborn each dawn. The Nile floods and recedes in eternal rhythm. The soul journeys through the duat, the underworld, and emerges renewed. There's profound comfort in that vision, particularly when we're seeking rest and peace. These stories invite us to surrender to larger patterns, to trust in transformation, to find meaning in cycles rather than fighting against them. But Osiris had a brother, Set, the god of chaos, disorder, and the desert. Set was not evil in the way that later religions would conceive of evil. He was rather a necessary force of disruption and strength. Where Osiris represented order, justice, and the fertile black lands of the Nile Valley, Set represented the wild, the untamed, the dangerous possibilities that lay beyond civilization. Set was the god of storms, of violence, of the red desert that surrounded Egypt. He was powerful and formidable, and he was also deeply envious of Osiris's position as king. The ancient text known as the Contendings of Horus and Set records the conflict that arose between these divine principles. Consumed by jealousy and ambition, Set murdered his brother Osiris. The manner of this murder reveals the sophistication of Egyptian thought. Set trapped Osiris in a coffin, sealed it, and threw it into the Nile River. The murder is both physical and psychological. It's the destruction of order by chaos, the swallowing of civilization by the forces of nature and disruption. But here is where the story transcends mere tragedy and becomes a meditation on love, grief, and the persistence of meaning in the face of destruction. Isis, the devoted wife and magician goddess, refused to accept the finality of death. She undertook an extraordinary journey, searching for the scattered pieces of her husband's body. With the help of her sister Nephthys, Isis gathered Osiris's remains, and through her knowledge of magic, through her sheer force of will and devotion, she performed the first act of resurrection. She restored Osiris to wholeness, not in the earthly realm where he could rule as king, but in the underworld, the Duat, where he became the judge of the dead and the symbol of resurrection itself. And Isis did more. She conceived a child with the restored Osiris. She bore a son, Horus, the falcon-headed god who would inherit his father's throne. Horus grew up in hiding, raised by his mother in the marshes of the Delta, protected from Set's wrath. And when he came of age, Horus claimed his birthright, not through violence alone, though there was struggle, but through the presentation of his claim to divine justice. The conflict between Horus and Set became not merely a personal vendetta, but a cosmological principle, the eternal struggle between order and chaos, between the inherited legitimacy of civilization and the disruptive force of raw power. Ultimately, Horus prevailed. He was recognized as the rightful king of Egypt, the heir of Osiris. But the victory was not absolute, not final. Set was not destroyed, but rather reconciled. He continued to exist as a necessary cosmic force. His strength was redirected, his power acknowledged, even as he was subordinated to the order represented by Horus and Osiris.
The wisdom of Egyptian mythology speaks across the centuries to something timeless within us. These stories understand that life is cyclical, that death and rebirth are not one-time events, but eternal patterns. They teach that order must be continuously maintained against chaos. They suggest that how we live, whether we maintain truth and justice, whether we act with ma'at, determines the ultimate quality of our existence. The myths of Egypt invite us to surrender to larger patterns, to trust in transformation, and to find peace in the knowledge that nothing is truly final. As you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself with the ancient Egyptians, watching the sun descend toward the western horizon. Trust that it will be reborn, trust in the cycles, trust in renewal. Rest now, knowing that in the eternal cosmos of Egyptian understanding, you are part of an endless, beautiful dance of creation and transformation. Good night, my friends.